yeah, I think we're probably good to get going.
Okay, thank you, Di. And good morning, everyone. Thank you to those of you who are joining us live and anyone joining us watching the recording back. This is our fifth breakfast brush up session, and I'm really happy to be here with Laura and with Steph. So, before we get into what we're going to be discussing today, would you like to just introduce yourselves and maybe say a bit about what your involvement was with the Oak NSEAD project? Do you want to start, Laura?
Sure. So I'm Laura Mays. I'm a primary art lead on the Isle of Wight, and my role within Oak was to be one of the primary creator team. I think I worked on about 100 lessons for the Oak Academy, so it was really joyous to be involved. And since working on that, I've been supporting my local authority with CPD for teachers, definitely talking about the Oak programme and so many of the wonderful things that it's about and the ideas that can be used within the classroom. So yeah, it was a really interesting year working on those lessons.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Great that you're getting to kind of continue that story a bit, but without the intensity of production. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Steph?
Hi, I'm Steph Cubbin. I worked as a secondary lead, subject reviewer for secondary, and even contributed a few little illustrations. And Oak was definitely a huge part of my life for a year. Um, since then, I still teach 2 days a week in Norfolk, and the rest of the time, I'm an arts consultant and part of Carrow House Studios, where I am a painter and printmaker.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. And we had Claire, who was your what's coming to my mind is partner in crime, but Claire was on our on the brush up a few episodes ago. So yeah, the two of you worked just so brilliantly together and had that really nice kind of symbiosis in the parts that you were kind of looking after to do with secondary. So thank you both for your involvement and yeah. And a really, like you said, Laura, interesting 18 months working on those lessons. And yeah, I hope you're feeling really proud and of what you produce because all the content is great and it's so nice now to be out there talking to people and hearing how they're using it. So today we're going to be focusing on this theme of convergent and divergent outcomes. So it's something that we hear fairly often when we're talking about art and design. Curricula, and it's this idea that in some instances it's really necessary for the pupils to be kind of thinking in similar ways and perhaps producing similar outcomes, the convergent and then the divergent being these moments where the students perhaps get to use those skills, techniques that they've been learning and produce different outcomes, maybe using their own lived experience, their own ideas, their own imagination, and they're able to enact that because they've been given that kind of visual language and those skills to be able to do it. So could you maybe both from your sort of primary and secondary perspectives talk a bit about just broadly, generally, how that the convergent line and divergent is threaded throughout? And then I know after that you're gonna share some lessons and units more specifically. So yeah, Steph, do you want to start with that, talking about?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely no problem. Because I guess we all know that when art is taught really well, it's such a powerful subject, and that, at its absolute best, it gives those students a real chance to explore their own interests. And as you go through the key stages, we want to encourage more and more and more of that. So they're creating work that they, I guess, generally care about. But it's working within a framework that makes it possible to have, I don't know, 25, 30 people in the classroom. And finding that balance between freedom and structure isn't always straightforward. So I guess with that in mind, we have designed lessons to offer that flexible starting point. So they're meant to provide guidance, but they're also meant to be adapted and shaped to suit different endorsements and school contexts. And when we were thinking about the whole kind of key stage 3, 4 curriculum, we always thought that we would always encourage teachers to download the materials and make them their own because local context really matters when it comes to meaningful teaching. So there are, and I will show you a little bit later when we do the lesson share, there are some units in Key Stage 4 that are generic. That means across all endorsements. So the topics of those can be taught across from textiles to photography. So it might be things around how you research or how you use your own personal resources or how you develop ideas. And then some of the units are much more endorsement focused, and they might have a lot more content that is kind of process and materials. So I guess the projects at Key Stage 4 are designed to support both, like the divergent and convergent, because early on, the students are encouraged to explore widely and generate lots of ideas. And then as the project develops, the focus gradually narrows, helping them refine and move towards more resolved outcomes, really. So all of those aspects have been considered, and particularly, and this is a key point, for all learners, because that accessibility is something that has been fundamental to the way that Claire and I have worked together. The inclusiveness and the accessibility were vital.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Steph. And Laura, how about in primary?
Yeah, I think similarly to Steph, it was something that we tried to embed throughout every unit and within every lesson. I think sometimes the problems that we can encounter in primary arts education are children don't have or haven't historically had the skills and the visual literacy to be able to achieve those divergent outcomes that we're hoping for. So I think within each unit, even within the lessons, they're broken down into this is the skill that we can work on, and then it's how it's up to you and how the teacher visualizes and how the children will see it of coming up with their own ideas as well to create that diverse range of outcomes that we want them to have the confidence to do. So whether that's from simple teaching, this is a skill of how we work with a paintbrush, and this is how we can make a color darker, in Key Stage 1. As that progresses, these very specific skills of how we can use our pencil in different ways and achieve tone, but also talking about what we might do and what we could do, and sharing that particular range with on a lot of the slides, you'll notice at the end when we're giving examples of what you may have created, it's always a may rather than a should have, which I think was really important to how the units ran.
Yeah, really good. And obviously, there's that kind of continuity, as you've both flagged, across the primary to secondary and how that's approached. But like you said, Laura, in primary, I think, where you've often got art being taught by non-art specialists, really important. Sometimes that can get overlooked. The simple things like, well, how do I hold a pencil? We can sometimes make assumptions that the students will just know, or they'll know how to choose the right sized paintbrush for the task that they're doing at that moment. So there's all that stuff is baked in as well. And then thinking about how that leads up to if it were an all through primary to secondary curriculum, it does build that kind of also builds that experience of the different materials and mediums. So Steph mentioning the endorsements up at secondary, and what we've done is that we've got all throughout primary and Key Stage 3 those opportunities to encounter textiles and printmaking and just such a lovely range of techniques and materials. So yeah. All right. So I can't remember who we were going to go with first. I think it was Steph. Would you like to share? I know you've chosen a specific lesson and unit to kind of talk about. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Just obviously is that working nicely?
That is a PowerPoint year 10 units. Yeah.
Excellent. I guess this is, I wanted to start with just the overview for Key Stage 4, because I've got two bits of lessons. So because the range from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4 is so vast, I've chosen a taster of a year 10, just to give you a flavour of how the generic units work, and then a taster of a couple of bits of a year, I think it was a year 8 lesson. so that you can see how we prepare young people towards GCSE. So what I wanted to say about this one is that some of the units you'll notice are the generic ones. So there are units in selecting primary year resources or looking at the elements and principles of art. And then there are the endorsement units like 3 and 4, where there are specific lessons for photography, for graphics, for textiles, fine art. And so there, that allows people to make those choices specific to those. And those are, as I said before, very technically centered. The one that is slightly different is responding to themes and genres, I wanted to point out, because often if you are a subject specialist, particularly if you're a printmaker or if you're a textile artist, you know the artists that surround your specialism really well. And so we wanted to provide a framework for somebody that was taking over textiles or taking over fine art and be able to direct themselves or the students that they teach to different genres of artists. So Unit 5 would not be used in the same way as you might work through the lessons in Unit 4, 3 or the others. This one is where students can choose the theme that they're interested in. So if you go into those responding to themes and genres, you'll see something that is figurative and portraits. You'll see something that is around objects. You'll see something around landscape, interiors, inside and outside. And then the lessons for those allow the student to be able to work through the theme that they have chosen. So if you've got a student that is looking at landscapes, they won't do the whole of Unit 5. They'll just go and find the landscapes unit that they can then work through. And in there must be 26 different artists that are relevant, that are completely diverse artists that they can then find to drive forward their thinking and their ideas.
Amazing.
So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight people to. And again, these generic units allow all the different endorsements to look and think about where they get their sources from and how they might share those ideas. There are examples that are in Sketchbook, but it was really important to us to not be focused in Sketchbook. We know that the direction of travel for all the exam boards, and we don't focus on anyone particularly, we look at that whole cohort of the suite of exam boards, the direction of travel for everything is less is more. You know, we know that all of the exam boards are saying we don't want to see, you know, huge amounts of work that we want to select.
Of course, referring to the curriculum assessment review and, you know, perhaps what's coming up with the new curriculum. So that's a really good point.
So actually what we, a lot of the way that we've designed Key Stage 4 allows teachers to think about whether they want to do stuff digitally, whether they want to present onto sheets, whether they want just scraps of paper. You know, it's up to the teacher. It's independent. It's definitely adaptable to the way that teachers want to work. What is useful, though, is that we've thought very carefully about keywords. And we thought very carefully about what those keywords might be. And I know that sometimes students' understanding of what development really is or what it means to respond can be challenging. So we've really helped with showing young people how to do those fundamental things.
And words like respond and select, that, you know, you're showing us a brilliant example here of how that's being explicitly talked about in a lesson. But from year 7 all the way, in fact, primary, but talking about secondary, year 7 up to year 9, those things appear implicitly as well, don't they? So we're all along, we're kind of coaching this culture of how do we review and refine? How do we kind of take a theme and make it our own? So these things are there even when they're not explicit.
Exactly. And it was also very important to not be writing focused. We know that if we want to make a curriculum really accessible, not every student will have be able to express themselves in the way that they feel comfortable with and are most confident with through writing in a book. It may well be that they are doing a PowerPoint or an audio file or a video or a group crit. And we've made sure that each of the lessons give those options because it is important to think of every student.
And
So,
that meticulous kind of reviewing that you and Claire did, really, it was looking after so many things. And that's just one of the many ways, like you mentioned, that this is really inclusive for the students.
yeah, I mean, I guess our approach to that was thinking about some of the stories over our career, some of the students that may have really struggled in mainstream education, that because of their writing skills and the focus being so heavily on written work in some schools, that they've struggled with that. So we bring those stories and those experiences, and we've listened to lived experiences, and we've read like the reports like Visualize that talk about how students need to see themselves in the curriculum, whether that is able-bodied or non-able-bodied or people from different heritages. And different ways of learning and neurodivergence, all of those things, students need to feel that that curriculum is for them.
Absolutely. And you really haven't, we haven't centered any one way of engaging with the GCSE, like you say.
No.
We haven't centered massive sketchbooks with loads of annotation, for example. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. So, and all the way through, we're asking young people to reflect on responses. That is important, to analyze and to think about directions and play and development, and how, there are no mistakes. Everything is an opportunity for learning. All of those things that we know work really well, we've put into the slides, into the lessons, so they can be used by teachers from every stage of their career. One of the things I then just very quickly, there's only a couple of slides on this one, was one of the year 8 lessons, I think, foundations. Oh no, it wasn't. It was year 10, but it was one of the textiles pieces. So I could share with you how if you are not a specialist and you find yourself teaching textiles, the endorsement lessons would be able to support any teacher teaching them. So as long as they have the materials. So it goes through again how you might go around what the applique might be, how you might go around designing something that can be used for an applique. And there are lovely examples and loads of lovely artists.
Amazing. And as you mentioned, you might, my specialism would be painting and drawing. So when I have had to teach textiles, this would have been so helpful in terms of breaking down the practical aspect. And like you said, in terms of just broadening out that knowledge of artists and makers.
And also just the development, I guess, all the way through. And what we've been very careful to do is make sure that the textiles that they do in Key Stage 3, and there are some beautiful textiles units in year 8, then increase in kind of complexity for year 10 and increase again in complexity for year 11, so that we know there is a progression of skill. And it's important to show student work so you can see how students before, having those exemplars are so valuable.
And this lovely kind of breaking down of the task, like you say, just makes it so accessible.
I think so. But again, if I was using it in my classroom, how might I adapt that? I might I might have a lesson observation and decide not to use all of the oak banners on the top, and I might take some of those things out and I might replace it with a school banner. I might find the images of the artists and put them in, because we've listed them. I'd go and find the images and I'd put those in. I do know that it would meet the criteria for a lesson observation, because it has the broken down chunked information. It is accessible. It has the vocabulary. You could print the slides out and have it for students who struggle to retain lots and lots of tasks all in one go, so that you could make sure that you're meeting the needs of the students, all the students in your classroom. So it's very much there for the adaptation.
Yeah. And what we're seeing here is some really good examples of like the convergence of the technique and you know, the use of the template, but then also some of the kind of characters and modeling how even within those more convergent kind of skills, technique-based tasks, there's also some kind of divergent outcome that can happen when the student starts to grasp that kind of skill and technique and then bring their own kind of exploration and experimentation into it.
Exactly. And this is designed for not, we wouldn't be expecting all the students to make, eyes. These are students bringing in their own source material, but learning how to use the methods to create an applique.
Beautiful images as well in there.
Right. I will come out of this now.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Steph. That's just, just seeing those clips from the lessons is really exciting. It just reminds all of us how brilliant the lessons are. So yeah, thank you. And Laura, would you like to?
Sure.
Do a
I
tour for us?
focused to follow on from Steph, that's a hard one. But I focused on a Key Stage 1 lesson instead, or a unit that had, and I was just going to talk through really an overview of the lessons to start off with. Because within it, just as we were, discussing earlier, there are some lessons which really focus on that convergent outcome with a wide option of what children might choose and select and use and refine. But some of the lessons are very much skill-based. And just for the context of this, I think it's our second unit within Key Stage 1, so Year 1 lesson. So they're still at that stage where half of the time it's in continuous provision, so they aren't necessarily used to whole class teaching at that stage. So it's very much adaptable to working in small groups with children rather than necessarily whole class teaching at this stage. But some of the things that we also try to do was really focus in this unit on allowing children the opportunity to negotiate and collaborate as well. Some of those tricky points with our small children, where they still might be trying to take ownership, and also understanding that others can do the same and how to negotiate your way through that. We try to give within the units a structure with sentence stems and discussing through what might be a bit of a difficult point when you're collaborating, and how to sort of work your way through that. And sometimes I think as well, it's as Steph was saying with the Key Stage 4 units, it's allowing those non-specialist teachers to understand where the difficult points you might come across will be, and allowing that how do we get through those as teachers, without it descending into an argument and chaos with those small children. So I was really looking at the sketchbook experimentation. So this lesson looks at how we hold a paintbrush, how we use a paintbrush, what paintbrushes like, what they don't like, and just for a long-term goal, really, it's going to save your art budget an absolute fortune with not ruining paintbrushes, and something that can be echoed throughout the later years as well. But learning that really early on we thought it was worth spending the time on that very specific skill. And then asking children to loosen their marks, how we might use our paintbrushes to make marks. So within this lesson, it was splatters, we can make swirls, and then applying that to the context of water. So what marks will be useful when depicting water. Again, what I really liked about this unit is that it can be adapted to whatever waterway is in your locality. So if you're close to the sea or if you're close to a river, luckily we're also close to some kind of water source, even if it's just a puddle on the playground. So understanding how you can adapt it very much to your context to make it more meaningful for your children was really valuable. And also looking at the different colours. So we spend a whole lesson within this unit. I think it's within this lesson here in lesson 3, colour matching and looking at how water actually isn't just one single colour, and how we can colour match to it, but then giving children the opportunity to widely look at how they can, how many different shades of black and tints of black, tints of blue and green and pink and all those other things that we might see, and really getting our children to observe as well, being really important in those younger years. As we went through this unit, though, we asked the children to work together to create an individual collage initially, but then to create a mixed media collage, sort of large scale on the floor, manipulating materials. And one of the things, again, that I really liked about it was that it allowed, with using sentence stems and discussing with our children, how we could create this collaboration, but also allow for discussion and negotiation. So in it, our characters have a disagreement about what they've made and what happens if someone disagrees with you or moves something, and is that okay if it is, and then how to get through that. So I really enjoyed this unit for the fact that it allowed those very specific skills that are very necessary in Key Stage 1, but also allowed for a really experimental approach towards the end, and to give non-specialist teachers the confidence to take that on, and allow children not just to sort of do a painting of whatever their topic might be, but really widely look at what art can be and how it doesn't have to be permanent, and it can be a temporary artwork as well. So there was a lot going on in here, but it really showcased those divergent and convergent outcomes and how that can be seen not only within a whole unit, but also very specifically even with one lesson.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Such a nice description of that, Laura. Thank you. And
I'll come out of
I love what you were flagging about the discussion and that sort of collaboration between those quite young students, and how you've we've got the kind of Oak characters modeling metacognition essentially, and I think that's something that we have throughout the primary and secondary. It would be really interesting to just pull out some of those conversations from Key Stage 1 up to Key Stage 4 and just see that progression, because we've also got that progression of the way they're talking to each other. And like you said, that's such a supportive thing for teachers who maybe aren't art specialists, or maybe aren't specialists in that particular medium for secondary. We've got obviously on the site somewhere that talks about misconceptions, the misconceptions that are addressed, but actually throughout the content, the way the lessons are built, preempt and address a lot of misconceptions throughout. Thank you both. I mean, that was just so thorough and so brilliant. And I just written down, and what was really coming through was how, the resources are a digital resource. So essentially they could be quite a flat resource. And they definitely come alive in the classroom when the teacher and the pupils enact the lessons. But what I'm really, like, listening to you two, what I'm really feeling and hearing is that so much of what was done in these lessons was possible because you were all practicing teachers, and the team was full of practicing teachers. And so you were really able to understand and, again, preempt some of those really practical things that we know would happen in the classroom. The kind of navigating 30 students doing printmaking, the students who it's their first time collaborating on a piece of art and they might be kind of feeling uncomfortable about sharing a piece of artwork. So all that stuff is possible because, you're real artists and makers and you're teachers. So that was really coming through listening to both of you. And also kind of occurred to me that actually, as much as we're here talking about convergent and divergent outcomes for the pupils, what I'm hearing is that the resource itself supports teachers in a convergent and divergent way. So as a teacher, there's opportunities for you to use the resources, as they are completely, but there's also plenty of opportunities for you to flex them. And of course, we're all adapting whatever resources we use for our particular setting, whether it be the locality, the river down the road, or the particular students in our class. So yeah, I absolutely loved listening to both of you, and it's kind of made me want to go in again and look at all the lessons. So thank you both so much for taking time out to speak with us this morning. And yeah, have a wonderful day, Steph. I can see you're in the classroom. Who's your first lesson of the day?
We've got year 7. They are doing Bauhaus architecture,
Nice.
but the outcome is textiles. So we are painting onto fabric today, ready for next week when we might do some stitching.
Oh, fabulous. Sounds exciting. Laura, how about you? Are you teaching today or
I
planning?
am. I'm year 1 this morning. We're looking at Anna Atkins, building up towards some cyanotypes, searching around our school grounds for plants and things for inspiration. So yeah, we're having
Sounds
a
brilliant.
morning, I think.
Well, have a great day, both of you, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.